Let's discuss the second chapter of a Volume 2 Economic Survey 2019 and 2020. And this particular chapter is on fiscal developments. Under this particular chapter, we'll be discussing certain financials related to the central government, certain financial numbers related to the state government, the financials related to general government, so on and so forth. Let me begin with the point related to medium-term fiscal policy statement. That is, usually when the governments present this particular budget, they basically give out a plan or the expected changes in certain numbers for the next couple of years. So as per the budget that was presented by the government in the year 2019 and 2020, these are the numbers which have been provided by it. One, as per the budget estimates for the year 2019 and 2020, the fiscal deficit would be reduced from 3.3% to 3% for the year 2020-21 and would be maintained at 3% for the year 2021 and 2022. Now, although the numbers have changed with the presentation of the recent budget, let me not discuss all of this here. As per the economic survey, it basically states that as was the budget presented, the government basically said in the previous year, that is in the fiscal 18 and 19, the revised estimate was a fiscal deficit of 3.4%. It would be brought down to 3.3%, and further in the next fiscal, that is in the year 2021, would be brought down to 3% and maintained at 3% itself. Apart from this, the revenue deficit would be 2.3% for the year 19 and 20, would be reduced to 1.9% for 2021 and 1.7% for 21-22. Now, what is the importance of both fiscal deficit as well as the revenue deficit? Please understand, whenever the government presents a budget, the expenditure side is usually higher than the revenue or receipt side. And since there's a difference between what they need to spend and what they are going to collect, this particular difference is bridged by government borrowing from the market. And this particular borrowing done by the government in the market in simple terms is referred as fiscal deficit. Now, this particular borrowing done by the government could be for consumption purposes, could be for investment purposes. That is, government could borrow in order to satisfy the deficit between the revenue receipt as well as the revenue expenditure. Within the concept of a budget itself, there are two accounts. One is a capital account and the second one is the revenue account. The capital account usually deals with the asset side, whereas the revenue deals with the day-to-day expenditures as well as the income collection of the government. So please understand, whenever Government of India borrows, we want it to spend as much as possible under the capital side of the budget. But most of the times what happens is, the government spends a high amount of money under the revenue head compared to what money that it collects under the same head. That is under the revenue receipt head. As a result of this, there is a revenue deficit which is represented here. And since there is a revenue deficit, the government needs to borrow from the market to bridge this particular revenue deficit also. That is a precise reason under the concept of a Fiscal Responsibility and Budget Management Act of 2003, we wanted to reduce this particular revenue deficit to 0%. But this particular reduction or the target has been affected. Even today, we are struggling to reduce this particular revenue deficit to 0%. Now, some of you will ask me a question, why do we need to reduce the revenue deficit to 0%? The basic thinking is, whenever you want to borrow from the market, you need to borrow for investment purposes, not for consumption purposes. As a government borrows from the market, it needs to spend it under the capital head, but not under the revenue head. And as you can see, the revenue deficit is accounting for majority of the borrowings of the government. The expenditure of a government from these particular borrowings that are done is majorly done under the revenue head, not under the capital head. That has been the main concern for various experts that are basically dealing with these kind of government finances. That is one point. Now, apart from this, the central government debt is expected to reduce from 48% of GDP to 46.2% of GDP to 44.4% of GDP by 2021-2022. This is also considered to be a good parameter. That is, the reduction in the debt is considered to be good for Indian economy. Please understand, as the debt increases, repayment liability of the government also increases. And as per various committees, in the recent times, the N.K. Singh committee has recommended that the debt of the central government must be reduced to 40% of GDP. So these are some of the points which you need to understand from the medium-term fiscal policy statement of the government. Apart from this, Let's discuss the concept of central government finances and what information has been provided in the economic survey related to this. First and foremost, the FD target for financial year 20 was kept at 3.3%. As we have already seen in the previous slide, for the previous year, that is for 18 and 19, the fiscal deficit target was revised at 3.4%. And as per the budget that was presented by the government for financial year 20, fiscal deficit target was kept at 3.3%. Second, the ratio of revenue deficit to fiscal deficit has remained the same for financial year 19 and financial year 20. Now, why this is very important? This is important to understand whether Government of India is borrowing from the market for consumption purposes or for investment purposes. We have already seen a huge amount of the borrowings which are done in the form of fiscal deficit used for bridging the revenue deficit. But Government of India says, or the economic survey says, the ratio of revenue deficit to fiscal deficit has remained constant or has remained the same. Since the ratio remains the same, it means the proportion of the borrowings that is used for funding or bridging the revenue deficit has remained same in the last couple of years and will continue to remain same. It means the proportion of borrowings which are used for funding the revenue deficit have remained same. Apart from this, they have also discussed the concept of improvement in the tax buoyancy. And they have discussed this particular improved tax buoyancy under direct taxes as well as indirect taxes. First and foremost, what do you mean by tax buoyancy? Tax buoyancy basically refers to a concept wherein the rate of the tax collection is measured against the rate of a GDP growth rate. That is, how much is the increase in the tax collection from one year to the next year or from one time period to the next time period is compared against the increase in the GDP growth rate during the same time phase. Now, what is the connection between both of them? The usual connection is that as the GDP growth rate increases, it means the manufacturing activity or the economic activity in the economy has increased. And when the economic activity has increased, it also means that the taxes which are collected by the government from these particular economic activities should also have increased. That is the reason there is a very close connection between the taxation as well as the GDP of any economy. In case of the concept of a tax buoyancy, we calculate tax buoyancy for direct taxes, indirect taxes, as well as overall all the taxes, that is including direct taxes as well as indirect taxes. In the recent times, the tax buoyancy has improved thanks to mainly the tax buoyancy in case of a direct taxes has been improving at a much faster pace. And the economic survey has listed out some of the reforms that the government of India has taken under corporate tax as well as basic customs duty and GST, which have led to improved tax buoyancy in case of Indian market. Now, the reforms in case of corporate tax mainly are two. One, in case of the manufacturing companies, which will be set up after 1st of October 2019, the corporate income tax would be reduced to 15%. And in case of other companies, the corporate tax has been reduced to 22%. These are the two very important reforms which have been taken by Government of India. Now, what is the importance of these particular reforms? Please understand, in recent times, there has been a lot of discussion related to the corporate tax rate which is applicable in case of India. Although, over a period of time, Government of India has taken certain measures to reduce the corporate taxes. This particular reform is considered to be the most important reform. Now, the Government of India says with decreased corporate taxes, the earnings or the retained profits of the companies are going to increase. And when the retained profits of the companies is going to increase, the investment in the market by these particular companies is also going to increase. And when the investment increases, we know the virtuous cycle of a growth will be kick-started. Apart from this, one of the very important reasons why Government of India has reduced this particular corporate income tax is over a period of time, many of the developed economies have cut down their corporate taxes. The objective is basically by cutting down the corporate taxes, they want to attract the manufacturing activity into their particular economy. For example, US has cut down the corporate tax recently. Apart from this, another very important objective for Government of India in order to cut this particular corporate tax is that because of the trade war between USA and China, some of the manufacturing companies which are located in China are looking at other economies to shift their manufacturing base. And Indian government wants to make India as one of the very important markets which will be able to attract these particular companies. And one way of making it is by reducing the corporate income taxes. So keeping in mind all these particular objectives, Government of India cut down the corporate tax on these particular companies to 22%. and on the new manufacturing companies to 15%. Second, in case of a basic customs duty, Government of India has taken certain very important measures, such as 1. There is a discussion of an inverted duty structure. Now, the concept of inverted duty structure in simple terms is like this. Imagine you import a raw material X using which you will produce a finished good Y. And in another situation, you are simply importing the finished good Y from the external market. If the customs duty on the raw material is, let's say, 20%, and customs duty on the imported finished good is, let's say, 5%. This particular structure is called as an inverted duty structure in case of imports as well as exports. To put it in simple terms, if the tax or the duties on the raw material is higher than the duties applicable on the finished good when it is imported, this particular structure is called as an inverted duty structure. The problem with this particular inverted duty structure is this. If the cost of raw material increases because of the inverted duty structure, it makes it more difficult for these particular companies to manufacture these particular goods in the domestic market. And moreover, rather than manufacturing and selling it in the market at a higher cost, it makes more sense to import the good directly because of a lower duty which is applicable on the finished good. Hence, whenever there is an inverted duty structure, it will affect the value addition in the domestic market. In the recent times, there has been a lot of discussion with respect to inverted duty structure even under the ambit of a GST. But more importantly, Government of India has stated that it has taken certain measures to address this particular inverted duty structure in case of the imports. Apart from this, Government of India also has imposed certain restrictions in the form of duties on various imports in order to promote Make in India. Third, to promote more and more exports, Government of India has extended the merchandise exports from India scheme till the end of this particular fiscal. Apart from this, on some of the goods which attracted export duties, Government of India has either reduced these particular export duties or has abolished the export duties to promote these particular exports. Apart from this, in order to generate revenues or to collect revenues, Government of India has increased the customs duty from 10% to 12.5% on import of certain precious metals. This is expected to add to the revenue generation of the government. This is under the head of the basic customs duty. Third one, under the concept of a goods and services tax. Under the ambit of a goods and service tax, the government, or to be more precise, the GST Council, has introduced a lot of reforms in the recent times. For example, they have added the MSME sector under the concept of a composition scheme. The concept of a composition scheme is that if you are availing this particular scheme, you will not be given any kind of an input tax credit, but you will be asked to pay a flat rate of GST. In case of MSME sector, the GST Council has fixed a flat rate of a GST of 6%. And those particular MSME units which have an annual turnover of up to 50 lakh rupees will be eligible for this particular concept of composition scheme. Apart from this, Government of India also introduced a tax dispute resolution scheme, Vivad Se Vishwas scheme, under which any kind of a tax dispute could be settled if the tax assessee or the taxpayer agrees to pay the amount of a tax as per this particular scheme, then this particular dispute will be resolved. Third, in order to boost the real estate sector, GST Council has reduced the GST rate on affordable houses to 1% and those particular houses which are beyond this particular segment of affordable housing to 5%. Fourth, a lot of rationalization has been introduced by the GST Council under the concept of a GST structure, wherein a lot of goods and services have been moved from one segment or one tax rate to another tax rate. So these are some of the very important reforms which have been introduced in the last 1 year in order to boost the GST tax collection, the basic customs duty collection, as well as the corporate tax collection, as a result of which the tax buoyancy has improved. The next is the discussion related to trends in the expenditure. Government incurs expenditure in the form of social welfare measures as well as economic infrastructure, or in simple terms, economic related expenditure. Now please understand, there is a need for the government to incur expenditure under both the heads. Government of India needs to ensure that it will incur expenditure for social welfare issues also or social welfare measures also, as well as will invest in case of economic infrastructure or economy related expenditures also. But more importantly, the economic survey mentions that the issue with respect to expenditure is committed expenditure. That is, the expenditure of Government of India in the form of interest payments, pensions, subsidies account for around 60% of the total expenditure. These expenditures that are mentioned here are basically part of the revenue expenditure. So in a budget which is presented by the government annually, more than 60% of their expenditure are under the heads of interest payment, pensions as well as subsidies itself. Within this, the economic survey mentions that there are certain committed expenditures such as salaries, interest payments as well as pensions. The committed expenditure basically means the Government of India has very less scope of reducing these particular expenditures. If Government of India tries to reduce these particular expenditures, it could be done only by defaulting on these particular payments. And the government defaulting on these kind of payments is not a very good situation. For example, if Government of India borrows from the market by issuing government securities or G securities and defaults on the repayment, then the repercussions in the market will be much higher compared to what benefit it could derive from defaulting on this particular repayment. So the committed expenditures in the form of salaries, interest payments as well as pensions are very high. What about other expenditures, especially under the revenue head? There is one expenditure, that is the expenditure of subsidies. Economic survey mentions that government in the recent times has taken a lot of reforms in order to reduce the expenditure under the ambit of subsidies itself. For example, Government of India has introduced the concept of a direct benefit transfer under the ambit of the fertilizers subsidy to transfer LPG subsidy, so on and so forth. By introducing direct benefit transfer in case of fertilizer subsidy as well as LPG subsidy, Government of India has been able to rationalize these particular subsidies, target these particular subsidies, and moreover, reduce the subsidy outlay under both of them. Apart from this, Government of India also has looked into reclassification of a central sector as well as centrally sponsored schemes. Having said so, Economic Survey points out that the capital expenditure is expected to be lower in the current fiscal. This is a cause of concern because please understand, Indian economy is already under a slowdown, and whenever you are in a slowdown, you expect the Government of India to increase its expenditure, and especially under the capital expenditure. Because whenever there is a slowdown in the domestic market, you cannot expect the investment to be done by the private sector. The investment initiative has to be taken by the government, and when government increases the investment expenditure in the market, the investor sentiment will improve, the private sector will start investing in the market. This is what is expected from the government whenever there is a slowdown in the market. But when the government itself reduces its capital expenditure, the recovery process will be slowed down, or the economic growth rate will not be revived very soon. So these are some of the points related to trends in the expenditure. Next point is related to transfer to states. The central government transfers certain funds to states mostly under the concept of a devolution of a state's share in the central taxes. In case of finance commission grants as well as the centrally sponsored schemes. These are the most important ways or the methodologies through which the center will transfer the funds to the states. As per the data given in economic survey, you can see that the total transfer to states from the center has increased over a period of time. Now, some of you will have a doubt related to what is this term of a devolution of a state's share in the taxes. Please understand, under the powers given to the central government will collect large number of direct taxes as well as indirect taxes. But some part of these particular total collection has to be transferred to the states. This is basically recommended by the Finance Commission in the form of a vertical devolution formula as well as a horizontal devolution formula. What I am referring here to is basically the concept of a vertical devolution formula. That is, out of the central divisible pool of taxes, how much of the funds will be given to the states all put together in the form of the devolution of a state's share in the central taxes. And as you can see, the devolution to the states from the central taxes has increased over a period of time. Before 2013 and 2014, the government used to transfer the funds from the center to the states, either to the consolidated fund of the state or would directly allocate it to the department or the authority that is involved in this particular project. But post this particular time period, the central government has discontinued the second methodology and now basically transfer the funds only through the consolidated fund of the states. Next concept that is being discussed is a concept of a disinvestment. To put it in simple terms, disinvestment is a process which is followed by the government where the ownership stake of the government will be sold in the market. That is, either the government could sell majority stake in a particular public sector enterprise that it owns, could sell only 5% of the stake that it owns in a PSA, or could simply sell off all the ownership in a public sector enterprise. So disinvestment is a process which is followed by the government to raise revenues. And this particular revenue is raised by selling the ownership stake of the government in these particular public sector enterprises. So under disinvestment, what actions or what measures have been taken in the last 1 year? One, listing of shares of Indian Railway Catering and Tourism Corporation, that is IRCTC, and Rail Vikas Nigam Limited, RVNL, was done. Exchange traded funds were issued. Basic concept of exchange traded funds is rather than Government of India selling certain number of shares from individual CPSEs, that is, let's say Government of India wants to sell certain number of shares in CPSE X, Y as well as Z. Rather than selling the shares of X, Y and Z independently, the government will pool in these particular shares and these particular instruments are sold in the market in the form of exchange traded funds. The most important type of exchange traded funds which are there in the newspaper discussion are CPSE ETF, Central Public Sector Enterprise ETF, as well as Bharat 22 ETF. So very recently Government of India has sold exchange traded funds in the market. Next, some of the initiatives of Deepam which are listed are: 1. Going for strategic disinvestment, reducing the shareholding of CPSEs below 51%. For conducting asset monetization, that is, some of the assets of CPSEs or PSEs will be taken and will be used to generate revenues in the market. The new mechanism has been approved by the cabinet. Next, apart from having equity ETFs, we also introduced debt ETFs, that is Bharat Bond ETF, which was approved by the Union Cabinet and which has been issued in the market. So these are some of the points which are mentioned in terms of disinvestment. Next, let's have a discussion related to central government finances. The central government's liabilities are usually provided under the concept of total liabilities. And these particular liabilities are basically divided under two heads. That is, it's a sum total of two components. One is a component of a public debt and the second component is the public account. Under public debt, that is the liability of the government in the form of a borrowing, is usually in the form of a internal debt as well as external debt. Now this is usually represented in this particular table. You can see that the total liabilities is a sum total of A plus B, that is the public debt as well as the public account. And the public debt is a sum component of A1 plus A2, that is internal debt as well as external debt. Now what is the inference that you need to draw? First, the overall liabilities as a percentage of GDP for the Government of India has kept on reducing. That is considered to be a very good feature. Now within this particular overall liabilities, if I have a breakup or look at how much is the public debt, how much is the public account liability, majority of this particular liability of the central government comes under the concept of a public debt. That is the second point. Third point, within the public debt, how much is the internal debt, how much is the external debt? Because please understand, internal debt is usually in the form of rupees which can easily be repaid by the government, whereas external debt will have certain repercussions or certain issues with it. For example, external debt, if the government has borrowed from the international market, then there is a problem with respect to currency rate fluctuation, there is exchange rate fluctuation as well as the interest rate issue. In case of India, thankfully, majority of the public debt is because of the internal debt. As you can see, the numbers, do not mug up the numbers, they are not important. As you can see in the numbers, majority of the debt is internal in nature. A very small amount of this particular debt is external debt. And within this particular external debt, if you basically parse these particular numbers, you will come to a realization that Government of India has this particular debt only towards the international organizations. That is, Government of India has borrowed from multilateral lending institutions, as a result of which there is an external debt. The advantage of this kind of a multilateral debt is this kind of a debt is not prone to the exchange rate fluctuation risk as well as the interest rate risk. In this particular regard, the finances of the central government are considered to be very, very strong. Apart from this, another very important point to be noted here is how much of this particular debt is short term or long term. The important concept here is if the debt is a short term, then the repayment liability will come very soon. This will put a lot of pressure on the repayment to be done by the government. That is, a debt service payment will be burden for the government. And if this particular debt is a long term debt, then the government will have sufficient time to prepare for this kind of a repayment. Economic survey notes that out of this particular debt, the debt which will have maturity period of less than or up to 5 years is decreasing over a period of time, and the long term debt which will have a maturity period of more than 5 years is actually increasing. This is considered to be good for central government finances. So to put it in a nutshell, out of the total government liabilities, the public debt is very, very high. Within public debt, the internal debt is very, very high. The external debt, though is present, is not because the government has borrowed from the international market, rather it has borrowed from international organizations. Hence, the exchange rate risk or currency rate risk as well as interest rate risk is not a problem for government. And beyond this, the short-term debt, which will have a maturity period of up to 5 years, is decreasing, and the long-term debt is actually increasing. So all these are the points related to central government finances. Now let's look at some of the points related to state finances. The economic survey notes that there is a rising trend in the revenue as well as capital expenditure. And within this particular expenditure itself, the increase in the revenue expenditure has been because of the committed expenditures. That is, the committed expenditures have increased, as a result of which the revenue expenditure has also increased. Second, as per RBI report, in case of state finances, there has been a fiscal consolidation in states' finances in the last 4 to 5 years. Although this is a very good feature, there are certain concerns related to this particular feature itself. That is, the fiscal consolidation here basically refers to the concept of a fiscal deficit. The states have been able to control the fiscal deficit, but there's a problem with respect to this particular control on fiscal deficit. The fiscal deficit can be controlled in many ways. For example, you could control your revenue deficit, and if you can control or maintain the same expenditure on the capital head, your fiscal deficit will be controlled. You could control your expenditure under the capital head and maintain the same estimates or estimated expenditure under the revenue head, your fiscal deficit will come down. You can have the expected or estimated revenue expenditure as well as capital expenditure. But if your receipts increase, then also your fiscal deficit will come down. So fiscal deficit can be controlled in many ways. But this particular control or consolidation which has been observed in case of the states' finances has been observed because the states have reduced their capital expenditure. Now in the present context, when Indian economy is experiencing a slowdown, it is the duty of the state governments to increase their expenditure. Having said so, it doesn't mean that the center does not have to spend. Center also has to spend, but more importantly, the states have to spend for a simple reason. Out of the total expenditure done in case of India, especially under the capital expenditure head, the states account for around 2/3 of the capital expenditure done. So the states will play a very important role if the Indian economy has to grow back or has to recover and increase its GDP growth rate. And overall, the expenditure of the states is much, much higher than the expenditure done by the center. Hence, in case of the situation, the states should follow a counter-cyclical policy. But rather than having a counter-cyclical policy, you can see that the states are basically following a pro-cyclical policy where with the slowdown, they are also decreasing their capital expenditure. That has been the concern raised by various experts with respect to this particular fiscal consolidation observation in the RBI report. Next, the debt to GDP ratio has increased since 2014 and 2015. This particular rise or increase in the debt to GDP ratio has been because of loan waivers announced by the state governments, because of Uday bonds which have been issued by the state governments. It has been because of implementation of 7th Pay Commission recommendation. And the economic survey also notes that the debt to GDP ratio is expected to remain at around 25% for the fiscal year 20. This will be one of the biggest challenges or very important challenges that will be faced by the states. Because please understand, as per NK Singh committee report, the debt of the states must be reduced from 25%, which is existing now, to 20% of GDP. So these are some of the observations that are given in the economic survey with respect to states' finances. Next, let's have a look at general government finances. General government basically refers to the center plus states. General government is expected to continue with the path of fiscal consolidation. That is, you expect the fiscal deficit to reduce at the central level also, fiscal deficit to reduce at the state level also. We have already seen the numbers. Second, the fiscal deficit is expected to come down from 6.2%, that is overall, of a GDP in financial year 19 to 5.9% of GDP in the financial year 20. The combined liabilities have increased from 68.5% of GDP at the end of March 2016 to 69.8% of GDP at the end of March 2019. This is another cause of concern for a simple reason. As per NK Singh committee, we are supposed to reduce the combined liabilities to 60% of GDP, of which 40% of GDP will be the liability or the debt to GDP ratio for the central government, and remaining 20% will be collectively given for the states. So rather than reducing the liabilities, you have seen that the combined liabilities or the general government liabilities have increased from 68.5% to 69.8%. So finally, the outlook that has been provided in the economic survey is 1. The global growth is expected to be weak, and in addition to this, the slowdown in the domestic market will add to revenue stress for the states. This has been emphasized from the perspective of the states for a simple reason. Right now, the states' finances are in a disarray. In the recent times, you must have heard of the dispute between the center and state related to the GST compensation, the problem with respect to the expenditure done by the states. And in the last slide itself, we have seen that the capital expenditure of the states has come down because the revenues of the state government are under stress. Second, there is a need to have a counter-cyclical fiscal policy in order to create demand. Now, what is this concept of a pro-cyclical or a counter-cyclical policy? Please understand, pro-cyclical means as the economy is changing from one phase to another phase, your policy will follow the change in the phase. That is, if the economy is slowing down, your expenditure will also come down. This particular policy is basically referred to as a pro-cyclical policy. In case of Indian government, both the center as well as the states, rather than following a counter-cyclical policy, they are following a pro-cyclical policy. In case of counter-cyclical policy, if there is a slowdown in the GDP, the state as well as center will have to increase their expenditure so that there is a revival of growth. So rather than having a counter-cyclical policy, they are following a pro-cyclical fiscal policy. Next, the geopolitical situation in West Asia are expected to have implications for oil prices, which would affect various macroeconomic parameters in India. We have already discussed the impact of the change in the oil prices on the Indian market. We have seen that whenever the international crude oil prices will increase, the current account deficit will be affected, the forex reserves will be affected, the retail inflation in case of India will get impacted, the fiscal deficit of government of India will get impacted, the household expenditures will have an impact. So the geopolitical situation in case of West Asia will have an impact on the macroeconomic parameters in India. These are the points which are discussed in this particular chapter.